What is the maximum amount of money a person can amass in his or her lifetime? You may be in for a surprise today, so be sure to stick around to the end of this video. Before we get started, welcome to Ultimate Luxury. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell if you want to stay updated on videos like this. Today, we're going to talk about the richest people who have ever lived. And even though the majority of them are long dead, even centuries later, we can still see the extravagant lifestyles they led. Let's get started. William the Conqueror. Although the royal family of England is frequently cited as one of the richest families in the world and has an estimated net worth of $88 billion, their enormous wealth is nothing compared to that of their forefathers. The first king of England, William the Conqueror, not only succeeded in seizing control of the British island when he was 38 years old, but he also amassed a massive wealth that today would amount to $228 billion. About one-third of that fortune came solely from tax payments that he accumulated from commoners in Normandy, which means that either those farmers were extremely wealthy peasants or they were highly taxed into poverty. I'll let you guess which is more likely. The remaining of his wealth, which obviously came from the British territory he had vanquished, came from the native noblemen who were forced to swear allegiance to the new king and pay exorbitant taxes that William thought were far too small to share. So with $228 billion, he finally chose to live in a tiny bit. Before his passing, he had built over 100 buildings, including castles, fortresses, churches, and the famous White Tower, all of which were adorned with elaborate decoration. He spent a large part of his money on building facilities. Since everything could be made gold, rather than painted at the time, and because gold was his favorite color, William's zone was covered in seas of gold and silver. Osman Ali Khan. Being the richest in India to ever live could perhaps say a lot, considering that people today in Asia live in 27-story homes, but still fall far short of Osman Ali Khan, the final ruler of Hyderabad. Ali Khan was in charge of the princely state from 1911 until India annexed it in 1948, and despite living in the same time as renowned businessmen like J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, Rothschild, and others, he is regarded as the richest man in the world. It's really a great feat that the country maintained its independence for that long. To be in charge of the government that was the main provider of the world's diamond trade and had the only operating diamond mine at the time is a mint, and amassing $230 billion is the absolute minimum one might hope to accomplish. Although he built roads, railways, and an airport for his nation, the Nizam could have made more money if he hadn't decided to invest the revenues in improving life for his people. Despite this, the ruler still managed to amass some extravagant possessions for himself, including $100 million worth of gold and silver, over $500 million in jewels, and one of the largest diamonds in the world, the Jacob diamond, which is valued at about $50 million. In order to display his riches, the Nizam gave Queen Elizabeth II diamond jewelry, a tiara, and a necklace for her wedding. This demonstrates that Ali Khan wasn't just the richest man in the world, he was also the one who had the biggest gonads to flaunt it, displaying it to the person who had oppressed his nation just a few years previously. Nicolas Romanov. Nicolas Romanov, also known as the last Russian emperor, ruled so ineptly that he successfully made Russia the perfect breeding ground for the idealism that still frightens the world today. Not everyone can claim to be the one who helped bring communism into the world. Not that anyone in their right state of mind would, but he did. One might assume that a person like that couldn't possibly be wealthy. But unlike in Russia, where the richest man was Nicholas II, who had $300 billion in his bank account while his people ate nothing but grass and dirt, there were some minor social miscarriages of justice that were evident. One could be excused for wondering how this person could have amassed such vast amounts of wealth when his residents were so impoverished. The answer can be found in America, or more specifically, Alaska. In order to avoid losing to the British, Romanov sold the oil-rich mainland to the United States. Of course, he had no clue how rich the soil was in resources at the time. He decided to sell it. One can only imagine the obscene wealth the ruler and his family experienced when visiting the magnificent palaces in St. Petersburg and Moscow, which may even be the jealousy of today's billionaires. One of these stately homes is the Kremlin, where a new power-crazed lunatic is currently living, although it is unknown whether his fate will be the same. John D. Rockefeller. John D. Rockefeller's status as the most productive individual to ever live is proof of how he rose to the position of being the world's richest person in the middle of the 20th century. Rockefeller is thought to have made more than $1.5 trillion over the course of his life. Therefore, it makes sense that by the time of his death, his net worth would have been close to $400 billion. For a few decades at the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century, he had a monopoly on 90% of the US oil market thanks to his Standard Oil Company. Rockefeller knew how to invest his money, not just make it. Unlike today's billionaires, he paid to avoid being constituted into the American Civil War, which most likely saved his life. This was one of his first significant purchases. But of course, one of John's biggest expenses was to construct all the family mansions, which today are nothing short of historical landmarks. In his later years, he had the brilliant idea to pay former British Prime Minister Winston Churchill to publish his biography. The idea didn't pan out, but the idea was wonderful regardless. In addition to being architectural marvels, they are also lavishly decorated with exquisite works of art by well-known painters. Rockefeller was one of the first billionaires who had a thing for cars back when owning a car was nothing short of a declaration. John had one of the first automobiles ever produced. It wasn't all great that Rockefeller left this world because he unknowingly set the benchmark where everyone who achieves 10 figures in their bank account has to have a carport of ultra-expensive cars. Mansa Musa. Being wealthy and from Mali looks like the start of a very offhanded remark today. But the criteria was a little different in the 14th century. Back then, colonialism had not ravaged the resource-rich country of Mali, and its first emperor, Musa, was regarded as the richest man in the world, with an estimated net worth of $415 billion, adjusted to today's money of course. Europe was among the worst cities to live in when Mansa Musa assumed power in 1312. Mass starvation, ongoing warfare, and numerous disease outbreaks devastated the land, and the Black Death was on its way and would soon wipe out the entire region. This provided an opportunity for some African kingdoms to rise and prosper, with Mali at the top of the list. Once in power, Musa overcame the city of Timbuktu, which at the time was exactly equivalent to Constantinople in importance as an African trading hub. These expeditions came with financially rewarding benefits that quickly made Musa the richest man on earth. In 1324, he demonstrated his vast wealth by making his way to Mecca in a convoy that stretched for miles in every direction. Not being one to travel on a tight budget, Musa was hauling tons of gold on thousands of camels and horses, had tens of thousands of people accompany him, and constructed mosques wherever he stopped so he could perform the appropriate prayers to Allah. Because of his wasteful spendings, Musa left the local industries in wrecks everywhere he went, causing inflation to rise so quickly that they couldn't keep up and eventually crumbled. This is how you successfully conquer a nation, by making the populace so wealthy that the city's industries can no longer support them. The United States could learn from Musa's example. King Solomon. The entries before the Jewish ruler could be regarded as absolute tragic gutter punks. The Bible considers King Solomon to be the richest king in history. According to the Old Testament, King Solomon earned about 25 tons of gold every year, for 39 years in a row, which is enough to construct a castle entirely out of gold without needing to give much of it to anyone. Something like Lego, only just a little bit more expensive. Experts have estimated that over his rule, thanks to his paying homage to taxation and other revenue and modern currency, Solomon's fortune would be equivalent to about $2.2 trillion. The Bible asserted that all of the king's expenditures were purely righteous. and he even founded the first Jewish temple in Jerusalem. Naturally, considering the nature of the source of this information, we can't really expect to see the king paying his bills with alcohol, drugs, and women. Augustus Caesar. Although it may sound like something Vladimir Putin will do at any minute, he won't be the first person to have declared himself as the first emperor of the biggest countries in the world. The same thing was done by Augustus Caesar around 2,000 years ago, and it undoubtedly benefited him. Through the state-forward political stunt, Augustus gained wealth that in today's terms would be equivalent to $4.6 trillion. When you consider that Augustus personally owned Egypt, which provided food for half of the empire, this almost unbelievable net worth becomes more plausible. Caesar could have enjoyed his breakfast on the head of the Sphinx or inside a pyramid if he desired. In addition to possessing a whole nation, Augustus was thought to have received at least 10 million gold coins from his uncle Julius. Given that much of this money was used to invest in infrastructure, landmarks, and temples, and that Augustus integrated his personal finances with those of the Roman Empire, the 10 million gold coins are estimated to be equivalent to $200 billion in today's money. Not an unfortunate start in life. Additionally, several million were used for public amusement each year, as the emperor supported gladiator games, chariot races, and other sporting events. However, his personal army of 250,000 soldiers, who were crucial to his plans to keep the nation under his control, was likely his most significant possession. He compensated them well. This would have cost Augustus roughly $250 million per year in today's currency. But what can I say? According to $4.6 trillion, remaining in power and ruling the largest country on earth is well worth this extra loose change. Akbar the First. People would likely mistake the Mughals' empire for some novel viral infection that would require a new global shutdown if you ask them what it was. Yes, the ancient Far Eastern civilization that once dominated much of the Indian subcontinent and the region south and west of the Himalayas had little cultural influence on Western civilization, but it had a significant impact on South Asia. Its significance is largely attributed to Akbar I, who was thought to have ruled over 25% of the world's gross domestic product at one point. Of course, this lessens the impact of his enormous wealth of $21 trillion. But anyone can recognize what an incredible sum of money that is. I would live a quiet life and frugal life if I had $21 trillion, but Akbar had a unique perspective. Even by modern standards, he had led a lavish life. The three magnificent palaces that Akbar constructed for himself in Delhi, Agra, and Fatehpur were elaborately decorated with so much gold that Donald Trump would have a hemorrhage just by looking at them. The interiors were also embellished with silk, marble, and a great deal of artwork. Akbar was a great supporter of the arts and spent a fortune on paintings, books, music, and other works of art. He even attempted to create his own religious practices by fusing Islam and Hinduism. But despite what you might think, this was essentially a political ploy to unite a country that was viciously partitioned by religion. Unfortunately, he was unsuccessful, and India would suffer the consequences for many centuries to come. Shen Song. Being the Chinese ruler during one of the richest eras in the nation's history undoubtedly has its advantages. Between 1067 and 1089, Shen Song ruled over China and created considerable wealth with him. The nation experienced stable growth and prosperity as a result of new progressive policies, which also provided much-needed relief to impoverished farms. Over 30% of the world's GDP was reportedly under Shen Song's control at the time, and estimates suggest that at the height of his power, Shen Song had an equal amount of $30 trillion to his name. Of course, Shen Song continued to live opulently in the royal palace that is still considered architectural monuments. But most of his expenses were on improving the lives of his people, and there aren't many documents left to tell us more about his chosen personal lifestyle. Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan was not the well-educated genius with access to money, an entrepreneurial spirit, or a flamboyance for investment and commerce growth that one might easily picture when discussing the richest person in history. Although the Mongol emperor is best known for his bloody warfare, which brought destruction, carnage, and massacres all the way to Europe, he did amass wealth worth over $100 trillion. However, given that he brutally murdered roughly 10% of the world's population in a period of 20 years, I wouldn't advise learning business lessons from this emperor. Because of the strategies he used to dominate half of the world at the time, Genghis Khan practically invented the first biological weapon. 2 centuries later, the bubonic plague will once again completely destroy the world, this time killing about 25% of the world's global population. That is how you leave a reputation. Despite his enormous wealth, Genghis Khan, also known as Temujin, who was born into poverty and slavery, divided up his wealth among his subjects. He did, however, have many wives, from which he had many children. Thankfully, he had enough money to pay all of his child support payments. So it appears that all it takes to rank among the wealthiest individuals of all time is to rule a nation with an oppressive regime, inject its economic system with personal fortune, and treat your neighbors badly. That makes me think of a certain current world leader somehow. What business lessons have you taken away from the top 10 richest people in history? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you like this type of content, be sure to subscribe to Ultimate Luxury, like, comment, and hit the notification bell so you can stay up to date on future videos. See you again soon.